Fantasy Football League was a British television programme hosted by Frank Skinner and David Baddiel. The programme was inspired by the fantasy football phenomenon which started in the early 90s. It followed on from a BBC Radio 5 programme hosted by Dominik Diamond, although the radio and TV versions overlapped by several months. 3 series were broadcast from the 14th of January 1994 to the 10th of May 1996, followed by episodes during Euro 1996. The show then moved to ITV for live specials on alternate nights throughout 1998 World Cup and then again through the 2004 European Championship. It is not known if the show is ever likely to return. In its absence, Baddiel and Skinner instead went on to produce a series of podcasts for The Times, documenting their experiences while traveling across Germany at the 2006 World Cup. The success of these led to the duo being signed by Absolute Radio, where they hosted a similar show from South Africa during the 2010 World Cup format. The format was originally heavily reliant on an actual fantasy football league, made up of teams picked by regular guest celebrities at the point that the game became popular in the mid-1990s. Each week, one or more of the celebrities would appear on the show and chat about football and the fantasy lineups as the show progressed on television. However, the Fantasy League was pushed to the background in favor of sketches and clips, and was eventually dropped altogether. The latter shows still had guest appearances from the likes of Nick Hornby, Damon Albarn, Peter Cook, etc. Although the departure of the fantasy team format meant it was less essential, the guests had a decent football knowledge than before. The television set was designed as a mock-up of the London flat where the hosts were purported to live. The two did indeed share a flat for some years, and the set was partially inspired by it. The idea being to represent the environment in which normal lads watch football at home. Celebrity guests would stand outside the front door of the set and ring the doorbell, always prompting Baddiel and Skinner to wonder out loud, who could that be? Quote, before being let in and announced. In the kitchen area stood the third regular on the show, Angus Logren, referred to only as Stato, clad only in a dressing gown and pajamas. He would dispense footballing facts and statistics on demand, particularly in the early shows when the fantasy league element was strongest. He was the butt of many of Frank and David's jokes, and was often made fun of for being apparently dull and naive, but quickly became an audience favorite, with chants of Stato, Stato becoming common later in the run segments. Other recurring moments in the show included Phoenix from the Flames. David and Frank recreate a famous moment from footballing history, usually with a retired pro or other famous footballing figure. This was a regular feature on the show, recreating a famous moment from footballing history with one of the people involved at the time, up to the last episode of the program. On the 3rd of July 2004, the number of recreations had reached 84. Jeff Astle sings, former West Bromwich Albion player, and Frank's idol. Jeff Astle would come in at the end of the show and lead the guests in an improbable rendition of a classic song over the credits. A minute's silence was broadcast on the show in his memory in UEFA Euro 2004 due to his death 2 years earlier, and various ex-players, e.g. Simon Garner, Brian Kilcline, continued the tradition by singing on the show. The Big Hello. David and Frank would announce that they were going to say a big hello to someone, usually some relatively obscure person with a connection to football, who would then say hello on a pre-recorded video clip. The whole studio would then reply with a very loud, big hello. After Germany were eliminated from Euro 2004, this was as a one-off change to a big goodbye, with the pre-recorded clip being the goal that knocked them out of the competition. A few things we've noticed from watching football this week. Recently, amusing clips that may have gone unnoticed by the viewer when originally shown. These often provided the basis for sketches or other gags later in the episode. Memorable moments. Skinner and Baddiel performed a sketch with toys, using a Mr. Potato Head to portray Nottingham Forest manager Frank Clark and a toy footballer with a genuine pineapple on top to portray Forest striker Jason Lee and his unusual hairstyle. This led to Lee suffering torrents of abuse from fans at actual matches, including chants like, "He's got a pineapple on his head. He's got a big pineapple on his head," quote, to the tune of "He's got the whole world in his hands" by Laurie London. The frequent mention of his name first started when in a Phoenix from the Flames sketch with Carlos Alberto, the hosts started singing the theme song, changing the words to "Pele was shite. Pele was shite. He was worse than Jason Lee." Quote, the following week a viewer who was a Nottingham Forest supporter had a letter read out on the show saying it isn't right to insult him in such a way, with Frank then saying they'll never mention him again, only for Jeff Astle in his Jeff Astle Sings closing segment to walk onto the set with an actual pineapple on his head, wearing a Nottingham Forest shirt. Jimmy Greaves and Ian St. John. Saint and Greavesy made a rare appearance back together as guests on the show during Euro 2004. St. John admitted in his autobiography he had not enjoyed the experience. The two were likely to have been invited on as they were often parodied by Skinner as Saint and Baddiel. Greavesy, in the early series talking about the Ensley League, then the tier immediately below the Premiership, as if it's important, a reference to the fact the ITV didn't have the rights to either the Premiership, owned by Sky with highlights on the BBC, or the FA Cup, owned by the BBC at the time. Theme song. The show's theme song consisted of the words, "Fantasy Football League," sung over and over to the tune of "Back Home," the England team's official song from the 1970 World Cup. After the move to ITV for the 1998 World Cup, the theme was changed to that formerly used by the channel's World of Sport series. For the Euro 2004 series, the theme was changed again to the one formerly used on the St. and Greavesy show. The various cutaway segments in the show, such as Phoenix from the Flames, would usually be introduced by having their titles sung over the show's main theme tune. Though a few clip series had their own specific music, the names of the celebrity guests were also sung in this way as they made their way into the flat Fantasy Football League at the Internet Movie Database. Fantasy Football League at TV.com.